Hello. If you can just let me know you can hear me and you can hear Ableton. And that would be great. If someone can let me know that you can hear me, see me and hear Ableton, that'd be amazing. Wicked, thank you, Andrew. Okay, so for some reason I seem to have lost the previous version of the masterclass where I arranged everything. I'm not sure what happened there, but that's not really that important anyway. The important thing is I have this to actually mix down. So that's what I'm going to be looking at today, a basic mix down. Now I'm a great believer in doing the minimum possible until you really know what you're doing. Once you really know what you're doing, then you can start using kind of advanced compression, multi-band dynamics, and stuff like that. In the first stages of doing a mix down, it's important that you make things better. Quite a few of my students in the past have gone, way, I found a compressor, I found EQ, and they've made their tracks which were really good before, and they've actually totally ruined them by going overboard with EQ and compression and all that kind of stuff. Vitally important that you do A/B testing the whole time, so you're listening to see if you're actually improving your music. If you're not, then there's no point doing it. The other thing that's really important to note is the conditions that you're mixing in. I'm surprised how many people think they can do a proper mix down in their headphones or on crappy speakers. Really important to have. They don't have to be, monitors that cost thousands and thousands of pounds, but it's important to have a decent pair of monitors and have your room kind of properly treated and have your monitors correctly positioned and more importantly, arguably than all of that stuff, is that you know your monitors, so you know how they sound and you know how the room you're in is going to colour your sound. So it's a good idea to have a setup that you're going to be using for a while, listen to lots and lots of music through your monitors, and then start to really trust your monitors. Once you start to trust your monitors, you can use other listening environments as referencing points. So you can have a pair of headphones in your studio, that's fine, and you can just check your mix is okay because you know your headphones as well, bounce between the two, go and listen to it in your car because you listen to music there all the time, or on your hi-fi or whatever, you listen to music a lot, and then that just gives you more of a a knowledge about how things should sound. If you're used to the sound system and you're used to hearing music through that sound system continuously. The other thing that, with that in mind, you should try and avoid is compare and despair, which means you're listening to professionally produced, mixed and mastered music and you're listening to yours and going, mine sounds rubbish. I mean, that's pretty normal, but you've got to remember that if you are a beginner, you're just a beginner and you're trying to do the best you can do, and over time that will improve. So it's more about just getting a ballpark idea of how loud the low frequency should be, where the highs are in the mix, where the synths are in the mix, the vocals where they are, and just getting that kind of rounded kind of knowledge of where things should be roughly in the mix, and you get that through having a pair of monitors that you can trust and you listen to a lot. And then you also get it by referencing on speakers and monitors that you listen to stuff on a lot. So, right, that being said, I'm now going to do this on headphones, so I'm going to undo everything I've just said. But for the purpose of the the masterclass, that's fine. Okay, so first thing is I'm going to play everything together. Okay, so everything seems roughly at the right level, but the most important thing about mixing, before we even get to like EQ and anything like that, is levels. So the volumes of everything running together. So maybe I'm going to turn my kick up a bit, and because that's put the mix into clipping, I'm going to select everything together. If I select everything together by grabbing the first channel and the last channel there, let's go. Let me close that group down and select everything together like that. I can turn everything down together, and that gives me a little bit of extra headroom. And I think bass is a bit quiet. Hats need to go up a little bit. Let's get rid of these sounds for now and just focus. So just trying to get a rough balance of the key elements, something that I'm happy with. Okay, so that's roughly ballpark. The other thing that I'm going to do is a little bit of panning as well. So you can have multiple claps or multiple hi-hats and pan some left and right. In our case, we've only put one clap in. So what I could do here, I could put another clap in there, and I could EQ it slightly differently. So we'll get to that in a bit anyway, but I'm going to pan one hard left and one hard right. So hard left, hard right. Maybe I could put a little bit of reverb on the one on the right. And we've got a crunchy, we've got this drum bus on, it's a bit too crunchy, so I'm gonna turn that down a bit. Okay, that balance seems to be okay for me now. So now I'm going to start EQing things. So the first thing is the kick drum. Okay, so it's a nice kick drum. Let's get an EQ8 on there like this. Have a look at what's going on. Okay, so we haven't got a massive amount of subs in that kick drum, that's nice. First thing that I could do is I could remove everything below a certain point. Get rid of these for a start, for now. So let's put this on ×4, so we've got quite a sharp slope of what we're cutting off. We don't need anything, certainly don't need anything below 20 Hertz. I mean, we could go up to 30, some people go up to 30, but you can't hear below 20 Hertz. And most speakers only start about 30 anyway, but I'm going to leave this at 20. Second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick a little bit of a sweet spot of this kick drum. This is something that isn't always recommended, but I think if you do it carefully, something that you can do. So let me just pick one of these, and then I'm gonna boost a little bit of the subs there, and then I'm gonna A/B it. So before, after. So I've given it just a little bit more of a punch. Maybe I'll turn that Q up a little bit. So I'm just picking out the sweet subby area. Okay, so that's nice. So I've got two claps here. One left, one right. Gonna do a little bit of an EQ there. Once again, there's loads of frequencies that I don't actually need here. I'm just going to add another little sweet spot to this and have it slightly different on the left to the right. If I copy this EQ from here, I can then tweak it to the right channel. So just Command and C on that EQ there. Just drop it in here. Command and V. Need to drop it after the drum rack, not before. Just going to put it in here. Okay, there we go. So if I move that there, I'm going to take the kick off now. That sounds to me a lot fatter than it did before. So the kick is sounding fatter and the claps are sounding nice and plasticky, which is the kind of sound that I'm looking for. You know, for the kind of cheap 909, 808 clap sound that is very famous in house and techno. I'm going to put an EQ8 onto my hi-hat now. Once again, there's loads of stuff that I don't need here, so I quite like that area. I'm going to put a bit of reverb on there as well. We've got quite a gritty, quite punchy sound now. Much punchier than it was before. So if I take the EQ off my hi-hat, it's like that. If I take the EQ off my claps, together they sound much weaker. Now what I would tend to do is when I've got to this point, is I want to hear the bass with my sounds. Okay, so a lot of subby stuff in that bass. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put EQ in there. There's loads of subby stuff that I don't need, so I'm going to use a slightly less steep curve now. Okay, I think that sounds better. Sounds quite nice to me anyway, like that. It's a lot muddier like that, but now we've compressed it a little bit and we've sidechained it to the kick already, I think. I'm going to tweak that a little bit. I think we did that in a I like that. That works with my kick much better now. It's beginning to sound a lot more punchy to me. We've still got a little bit of grit coming from this drum bass. That's a kind of choice. Yeah, I quite like the kind of lo-fi sound, so that's kind of added a little bit of a lo-fi edge for me. We'll turn this reverse kick drum. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try this stab in here. Once again, we've got loads of low frequencies that we do not need at all. I'm going to use a slower curve here like this. I just want that area really. And we could add another one on top here if we wanted to take out some of the higher frequencies. There we go. I just made it cleaner and sit a bit nicer. We could even turn it up a bit then. So look at this compressor on the drum. Okay, that's with the drum bass off now. Maybe it sounds better with it off. Once again, I'm going to turn down everything together because we've gone into clipping together. Everything is clipping. So just turn everything down together. Okay, I think I prefer that sound now that I've EQ'd everything with the drum bass off. Okay, so this snare, I'm actually going to compress this snare a little bit. Bring down the decay time with reverb. To this snare here, let's have a little listen. So I'm going to start with a nice preset. Just going to go for classical compression to start off with. Going to turn the threshold down. Yes. Turn the attack up a little bit. compressor on, compressor off. Just giving it a little bit more so I'm going to EQ that as well now. Now this is a choice. Do I put the EQ in front of or after the compressor? Let's try both options. That's after the compressor. See, it's a bit harsher before the compressor. I'll put it on after. It's a little bit subtler, I think. So we're beginning to get a sound that now everything is kind of gelling together a little bit better, and everything is kind of finding its little place in the mix a bit. And the sounds that need to be punchier are now quite a lot punchier. So let's have a look. We've got some percussion stuff that I've listened to. Okay, so we have an EQ3 on that already for effect, but I'm going to put the EQ8 on there as well. Let's take all that low stuff out, we don't need that at all. So we're just going to take a little bit out of this breakbeat, some frequencies, we don't need them all. Before, it's like that. Too much going on with all the highs and everything. And this percussion here, just going to put a little bit of compression on this. Okay, so we're getting that sounding quite a lot louder now as well. Still subtle though, nice and subtle. And then EQ this again. Get rid of all the stuff we don't need. Okay, so now that's sounding a lot more like a punchy rhythm to me. The bass is sounding a lot like it's not so subby, but So now, for me anyway, with a little bit of tweaking, nothing too major at all, everything is just beginning to work together. So now we've got that the arpeggiator and the string. Have to turn down everything again together, and then we can look at the string and let's look at this arc first. Turn the frequency. First thing, let's get some of this reverb and delay off it. First of all, get rid of all the things we don't need. So maybe we could go right up there. So now it's just occupying that part of the frequency range. And because we've got a filter on it as well, I'm also going to put a compressor on there. Okay, that works better for me now. Let's have this string. So I'm going to probably get rid of those lower root notes. Just have those higher harmonics. Okay, and before we had all this stuff, it didn't sit very nicely with each other, and it probably, you know, when we arrange it, we'll separate it all out again. But now, for me, that's beginning to make a lot more sense than it did before. Okay, so that's the end of the demo. It's now time for you guys for questions. Hopefully we get a few questions this time. It's been a bit quiet on the old question front. It's quite a small class actually, so that does explain why. Right, so in the course videos, the guy used a limiter on the master. Would you normally do this? Right, so that's mastering. Today I've focused very much on the mixing techniques. When you're using a limiter on the master, it's very much about getting some perceived loudness in there, and I would do that. Yeah, so I would, when I'm finishing a track, either put a limiter on it myself, but normally I'd let the mastering engineer do it, so I wouldn't put any compression or limiter on the master channel at all until I'm going to the mastering phase of the production. So I would, when I'm mixing down, I definitely wouldn't put a limiter on the master channel. But also the limiter had a look ahead setting. What are the practical uses of changing this from the default of 3 milliseconds? Okay, so look ahead will introduce some latency into proceedings. Basically, what it does, what an analog compressor can't do, and then it actually analyzes the signal before it compresses it. So if you have a look ahead time of 10 milliseconds, you can have a super fast attack time, which you couldn't get on an analog limiter or analog compressor. So that's what it does. So if you ever need a super fast attack time, then that's when you can use it. Other than that, that's its only real function. It gives the compressor a chance to analyse the audio that's coming into it before it's processing it. So that's what the look ahead does. So in most situations it should be fine not to use it, but maybe if you've got a piece of audio where you've got really fast something, you want to catch the attack of something happening, then you could use it then. Right, so I hear that some EQs add colour to the sound. What does this mean? Right, so sorry, my missus is messaging me. Right, so colour of sound just means that they add some sometimes desirable effects to the sound, but they change the sound just by naturally being, in the analog sense, it would be the processing. It's going through analog circuitry. And that changes the sound, especially if it had valves in it. That was a very, very pleasing way of, colouring the sound. It would add harmonic distortion to the sound, for example. So colouring the sound just means changes the way something sounds, even when it's flat. So you have the EQ with no settings at all, and it will still colour the sound. So EQ8 doesn't really, in its normal setting, is pretty transparent, whereas EQ3 does. EQ3 makes the signal sound more like a DJ mixer. So if you put EQ3 on And even if you don't change any of the settings, it will sound a little bit different. And some of the some of the analog emulation plugins will do that as well. Even when you don't change any of the settings, they will change the way something sounds. One of the most common things, like I said, is to add harmonic distortion, which is distortion that sounds pleasing to the ear because it's harmonious, and it's very famous. You know, the valve compressors and all the valve hi-fi gear, will make things sound different. You won't get a clean reproduction, but what you get is you get it sounding different in a nice way. Hopefully that explains it. Yeah, that's a good question, mate. What's the easiest way in Ableton to A/B the entire mix with an unmixed version of Ableton? Probably have. Ooh, it's a tricky one actually. There's a few ways of doing it. There's no real easy way of doing it. They should introduce it actually. That'd be super cool if you could bypass all the effects in one go. I suppose you could. One way you could do it is you could set up a MIDI. It could be a bit long-winded. Is you could set up a MIDI or a key to turn all your effects off at once, I suppose. So you could go like that, A, and then I could go to this channel and put, let's open this up and go to here, and then I could put A on there as well, and just carry on doing that with all the effects. And then when I press A, it's going to turn, or it should turn all those effects on and off, although it seems to only let me with the key do one at a time. It's not working now. I think I need to turn that off. Yeah. Okay, so I'll turn that off, and that will turn them all off at once. So you just have to set that up either with a MIDI or the key button here, and then just have a controller on everything. So you press it and it turns everything off together. Other ways would be to have two projects with everything on and then everything off, which is also long-winded. And the other way would be to bounce before you put the effects on and then listen afterwards. So there's no real easy way of doing everything together, but I think really you should be looking at one thing at a time, and that's how I'd do it. So I'd EQ that, and then I'd listen to the kick drum, and then I'd listen to it with the bass, and then I'd listen to it with the effect off, and then with the effect on, and then I'd do the same thing with everything. So I'd be kind of giving everything a kind of A/B constantly while I'm doing it. That way, I don't have to do everything together, if that makes sense. Okay, what are the rules mixing the low mids? DJ, iRise, have you been in both masterclasses today? Ah, strange. Were you in the other one as well? Um, what are the more rules mixing with low mids and highs? Right, so low mids is the area where things can get quite muddy if you've got a lot of stuff going on in those areas. So you just have to be mindful of making things not kind of clash, basically. Um, so you know, how did you manage that? Yeah, so so you have to be mindful in the in the low mids because it's the area where you can make things very very muddy. So I think you want to just make sure you haven't got too much stuff going on in that range of things. Um, so yeah, just be careful. Maybe EQ some of the low mids out in sounds that don't really need them, um, and yeah, be mindful. Um, keep high standard. I think um, yeah, I mean, you could. There's one way that you can use pink noise actually to um, go through your mix and get all your levels right, and get all your frequencies sounding right. And that's if you go and Google pink noise mixing, there's a few good demos online for that. If you're a little bit lost, also highs can be quite harsh if you push them too much. A lot of people compress stuff and limit stuff, and the highs become quite harsh. So you keep an eye on that as well. Everything in the low end should be mono anyway. Don't go pan and kick drums, things like that. Hopefully that's helpful. So how come you managed to get to both masterclasses, DJ iRise? Really? So yeah, it's unlisted though. So I wonder why you could see that. It should be unlisted because this one is for a class. Yeah, but this is for a class that you're not on, and you'll get this masterclass later as well. I have to look into that, see why that's actually worked out the way it has. But yeah, this is a bit more advanced in your class, but I'm pretty sure it should be unlisted, so I'm not sure how that would work out without having the link to it. Strange, but anyway, you are getting a bonus today, so enjoy it. This is week 8, and you're on week 2. So yeah, big jump ahead, mate. Just don't tell anyone else, okay? Yeah, okay, so yeah, it's very bad practice to automate the fader levels because that means that you're basically denying yourself the ability to do a mix down at a later stage. Because if you do a mix down and you've automated that stuff, then it's going to undo all the automation. It's going to deactivate all the automation when you actually start moving the faders around. So, bottom line is, if you want to do volume automation, either automate the volume on the instrument if it's a MIDI channel, or use utility. One or the other should give you the ability to automate the volume while still keeping your faders for mix down when you need them. No problem, man. Okay, so right, I could give you a rough explanation of multi-band compression. I can't really tell you how to use it yet, but basically what you're doing with multi-band compression is you're splitting the signal up into three different bands. So let's say lows, mids and highs, and then you're compressing those bands individually, basically. So your bass is compressing its own signal, but it won't affect the mids and the highs. So if you've got a kick drum and a bass line and they're compressing each other, they're not going to start making your highs pump. So it's a way of splitting the signal up into three. So you imagine splitting the signal up into three different bands, sending each band off to a compressor, and then sending them back together as one signal again. So that's basically what it is. It's compressing your three bands individually and then merging them back together as one signal. So the human here it can't hear below 20 hertz. Most sound systems, even in the big clubs and concerts, will not go below 30 hertz. So I know a lot of people that EQ out everything above, sorry, everything below 30 hertz because that's you're not going to get a sound system that's going to be able to play back anything below 30 hertz. So it's your choice. The problem with those low frequencies is they do take up a lot of energy, and so you may have a big speaker system, and although you may not be able to hear the sound system. It depends on the sound system. They'd normally filter it out themselves on the sound system, so the waves aren't going to affect the speaker. But if it's not filtered out, you're going to get that energy going into your speaker, and it's going to be trying to move the subwoofer really, really slowly, and it's going to stop the subwoofer or the woofer from being able to represent all the sounds properly. So it's going to eat up a lot of the energy of your speakers. So if you've got those sounds coming through your monitors in your studio, and your monitors are trying to represent them, it's going to use up a lot of energy. So that it's a lot of waste of energy basically if you've got all those sounds, all those frequencies going on at that low level that you're not using, if that makes sense. Okay, so 5 minutes left, still time for a good couple of questions here. Okay, so right. Right, so all it is, simple. You're processing, you're EQing the middle, so the central sounds. So you're splitting up the EQ into mid and left and right, and you're EQing them all separately. So you can have a different EQ on the center as you do on left and right, kind of like I showed with the claps, but actually doing it with one EQ unit. So you've got a slightly different EQ. Yeah, so it's slightly different EQ on your left and right and your center. So that's basically what you're doing. So if I go into my EQ here, and I've got mode here, and I've got left, right, mid, side. So left, right, I'm just EQing the left and the right separately. Let me turn that on. Or the left or the right separately. Or mid side, I'm doing the sides or the mids separately. So it's EQing what's going on in the middle, not the mids actually, the middle, the center, and then the sides. So it's a little bit confusing, but you're basically EQing the separate EQ on the center of the audio to you are on your left and right channels, if that makes sense. Okay, guys. Well, look, that's the end of. So, right. So basically, you're EQing the center of the sound and you're EQing the sides of the sound separately. So anything that's in the center of your mix is going to be EQ'd separately from the things on your left and right of your mix, basically. Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Well, look, it's been a pleasure, and hopefully you learned something from today. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon. So take it easy, people. Later. Bye.